Hello all. In this video, we will go over the introduction into IT business analyst role. Please do go over this video till the end. And if there's any questions, feel free to comment below and I'll get back to you on those comments. Let's go to the training. So today we'll start with business analysis. And as a part of business analysis, we will start with the waterfall model. The business analysis will also cover the software development life cycle. We cover both parallelly because it goes kind of complements each other. And as a business analyst, you should be well aware of the software development life cycle process. So hence, I'll be covering SDLC in depth and also business analysis in depth. So let's start with waterfall. So waterfall model is the earliest software development life cycle approach that was used for software development. The waterfall model illustrates the software development process in a linear sequential flow. This means that any phase in the development process begins only if the previous phase is covered. So just like the waterfall, so unless and until the water is going to flow through one step, it's not going to go to the next step. Meaning, so unless and until the planning is completed, we cannot go to analysis. And unless the analysis is completed, we cannot start requirements gathering. And unless and until the requirements gathering is not done completely, we cannot start design. So, and the science applies to other phases as well. So, these are all the software development lifecycle phases. I'll actually give a very brief overview. We are going to deep dive into each and every phase, but I'll just give a very brief overview of the SDLC, software development life. So it starts with planning. So let's say, for example, if it's going to be a market expansion strategy, then there might be a need to expand the market. There might be a need to enhance customer retention and reduce customer defection. So for every project, we'll have a problem statement or a business purpose. So it could be a market expansion strategy of a banking organization or an investment banking organization. So these are all the SDLC phases. So it starts with planning. So it could, like I was just saying, it could be a market expansion strategy or a bill has been passed. Okay. So the bill would say, if you go to a factory, then governing body information must be documented. So who's the governing body? The governing body would be the management of the factory. So you got to document who's the director, the other related info. If you go for an inspection, if a factory inspector is going to go and inspect a factory, then they have to document all these info. If a regulation like that is passed, then your application must be capable of doing it, right? It might require a couple of pages. It might require maybe a batch. So your application must be in compliance with the regulation that was passed. So that could be a business project, correct? So this is where planning comes in. So what do we do in planning? So in planning, we initiate, okay? The initiation takes place. So we'll sit down, or you could call it discovery phase. Another way to call it is discovery phase or initiation, but that's the genesis of the project. Okay? Why are we doing it in the first? It could be a market expansion strategy to enhance customer retention and reduce customer retention. It could be a bill that got passed, something else that they are trying to fix, or maybe it's a migration project. So there will be a business problem that has to be solved. So that's what happens in planning. They initiate the project and come up with the business purpose. That's what happens. What is the business purpose of doing this? And what is the scale and scope of this enhancement? So I would say, so even before planning, it happens during the initiation. The discovery phase happens during the initiation part, where they do discuss about the business purpose and then about why are we even doing it in the first place. But then during planning, that's when everything gets crystallized. They'll actually put pen to paper and document it maybe in a Word document or an Excel document. They'll document the business process, the business purpose, they'll document the business goals, they'll document the stakeholders, they'll try to come up with a budget, try to come up with a timeline. All these things will happen in planning. So initiation and then planning. So planning happens on a level of project. Okay. There's going to be one planning phase for one project. So it's going to be maintenance. Maybe there's going to be a planning phase every year. So what is maintenance? This is something that you have to be aware of. So maintenance is a activity, or there will be a maintenance team in each and every organization, at least in most of the organizations traditionally. So think of it as your apartment's maintenance cost. So tomorrow you have a pipe leak, or your light is not working, or the exhaust is not working. So you call the maintenance. So all these mid-level items, too small to mid-level items, will be taken care of the maintenance team. The same applies to applications as well. There is a bug, there is a defect. We are in need of a very small enhancement or some level of mid-level enhancement so that the application serves the need better. That's when maintenance team will come into the picture, and they are going to be there. If you become a contract on a maintenance team, you're going to stay there forever. I used to work for the maintenance team. In fact, I'm still working for the maintenance team for the Texas state, and then it just goes on. I've seen staff who work in that team for 10 years because the same science applies, right? In an apartment complex, if the apartment complex is going to exist for 50 years, we need a maintenance team. We need some sort of maintenance, right? We also call that maintenance. Same science applies to IT. So in the case where it's a maintenance team, a planning phase happens every year. So what is other than maintenance? Projects, right? When it comes to projects, it has a fixed start date and end date. So think about a project like this. Okay. So now you want to construct a new building in an apartment complex. We need a new building altogether, or maybe a cutting edge gym. Okay. So it has all these latest equipment. So will the management rely on the maintenance team or a third party contractor? We don't need them once the gym is constructed. We don't need them. Hence, that is a project, quote unquote project. The same science applies for applications as. So, say for example, if the JP Morgan is going to come up with a market expansion strategy, so we need to come up with a set of features and functionalities or a page or multiple pages. It has a fixed start date and a fixed end date and a fixed budget. Could be 2 years, could be 3 years, but it's not going to go on forever, right? So that's a project. Or if a bill gets passed, this is another example that we talked about. A bill gets passed within a certain timeline, maybe 12 to 18 months, you got to execute all those features, put it into the real time environment. So the duration of that project could be anywhere between 18 to 24 months or 12 months to 24 months based on the client needs and wants. That is a project. So it's very important to understand the difference between a project and a maintenance. Project and maintenance, it's two different. Okay. So I work in a maintenance team, and I'll be with them till the end of this week, and I'm taking up a new role actually. This one is in US bank. So I'm going to take up a new role as a product owner. So it's coming to an end. But if you ever get a chance to work for a maintenance team, I would highly suggest go for it, because it's going to go on. Your project will keep on extending. Even if you are an employee for a maintenance team, you have a lot of job security, which is not that much in IT. So this is something that you can have in mind. Now let's get back to syllabus. So we just talked about what is project, what is maintenance. Now let's come to planning. Okay, so planning is going to be on the level of project, and every other phase. Okay, so every other phase that you're going to see here is going to be on the level of release, right? A project is going to have multiple releases. So releases come under the umbrella of a project. So one project might have 4 to 5 releases every 6 months if it's a 2.5 year project, right? So the planning phase comes under the umbrella of a project, and all the other phases that you see here, analysis, requirements, design, development, testing, will come under the level of release. So this is something that you have to be aware of. And then, so this is what we do in planning. So what do we do in analysis? Okay. So the analysis is the phase. I would say it's a business analyst phase. Okay. So analysis is when you get familiar with the current application and the current business process. Okay. Now, let's say you walk into an organization, you walk into banking organization, you might not know domain related information. You might not have any info based on the domain. Okay. So you might not be a very a domain based expert. Especially if that's the case, analysis is going to help you, because it helps you understand the current business process flow and current application process. If you talk to an end user, you'll be able to understand how the system works. So that's where analysis comes in. I would say a BA is as good as the analysis phase. So if you really make use of your analysis phase properly, then you'll be really able to take up a lot of work and finish it and execute it. And over a period of time, you'll become a very attractive and a useful resource, because through your analysis, you are more or less like an end user expert. So that is where analysis comes into the equation, especially for a BA. And we will deep dive into analysis too. This is just a very, very short introduction. So next is requirements gathering. So this is when you gather all the requirements. You go, you talk to the end clients, you talk to the business, you gather the requirements, you set up meetings, and you kind of understand what they want, document it. Okay. So requirements gathering will be done by the business analyst, right? Now, in a business, then once you gather all the requirement, you come up with a documentation named business requirement document. So, what is the language used in business requirement document that you will document as a BA? Business language. It's going to be there on the language that the kind of language that will be used to document the business requirement document is business language. Now, in the design phase, the developers will convert the business language into system language. Or, in other words, high level requirement gets converted into low level requirement. Okay. That's where design comes. Right. Now, why are they doing it? Okay. So they cannot code looking at a business requirement. They cannot code you looking at a business language. They can only code looking at a systems language. So that conversion needs to take place. High level requirements converted to low level requirements. In other words, business requirements converted into system requirements. Okay. Now, who's going to do the system design document? The developers are supposed to do it. But then, through this course, I want you to be equipped in such a way that you are also able to do the system design document, so that if at all you get an opportunity to do it, you are able to execute it properly. So next is development. Of course, this is where they actually go do all this coding, product gets built, and then testing is also self-explanatory. So development is the phase where you actually come up with the product and then you test it. Now, the same science that's used in production applies here too, right? So you produce something and you test it. There might be a dummy testing. There might be variety of testing variety of tests that will be done. The same science applies for software too. Then comes testing, and then release. You actually put it into the real time environment. You give it to the end user. So this is a very high level overview of the SDLC cycle, software development life cycle. So let's start with the very first phase, which is the planning phase. Okay. So during the planning phase, we come up with something called the project charter. We come up with the communication plan, and we come up with stakeholder analysis. So first is project charter. So a project charter is a formal, typically short document that describes your project in its entirety, including what the objectives are, how it will be carried out, who the stakeholders are. It is a crucial ingredient in planning the project because it's used throughout the project life. So this is a project chart. Okay. So the project charter, what and all does it contain? It contains the project background. Okay. So this is something that we spoke about. So what is project background? What is the primary purpose of coming up with the project? So it could be, like I said, it could be a market expansion strategy. It could be a regulation. It could be some sort of a background check enhancement. I worked on a project where they enhanced the background check feature. It has to interact with they set up web services and APIs that's going to interact with multiple other applications. So these are all the purpose as to why we are even doing it. So that's where project background comes into the picture. The next is stakeholders. So who are all the stakeholders? So anybody and everybody impacted by the project would be a stakeholder. So who are all stakeholders? The end users are most definitely stakeholders because at the end of the day, they are going to use the application. So whoever is going to sponsor the project will be a stakeholder. The failure or success or failure of the project would most definitely impact them. IT team, we are all stakeholders, like the developers, testers, we are all on it. We are all in it. Business, whoever is going to give the requirements, they are also stakeholders. Now, since we are talking about stakeholders, I would like to introduce you to a topic as to who are all the players in IT. So I would like to introduce you to this as to what kinds of players are there in a typical IT team, which is kind of important. So generally, an IT team would consist of the following players. Okay, so there will be a project manager. There will be a couple of business analysts. There will be a couple of developers and there will be a couple of testers. So this is just the IT team. And apart from that, this is the important part that most BAs who come into the market, they might not be aware of this. There might be a business liaison present. Okay. So now who's the liaison for IT? BAs are the liaison for IT. Likewise, there is a business, right? Projects are an interaction between business and the IT, right? So even if it's going to be a company like Morgan Stanley, there's going to be 5 or 6 business-based members who are high-level staffs, and then there's going to be IT. It's going to be, and so the business will give the requirements, the IT will deliver the requirements, right? Now, BAs are the liaison. Very first term that was come to your mind when you hear the term BAs, or when they ask you this question in the interview. So, tell me about your roles and responsibilities in your previous project. The very first term that has to come into your mind is I was in the liaison. I was the liaison between IT and business. Likewise, you are representing IT. So you are a kind of a representative for the IT. Likewise, there are representatives for the business as well. Okay. So they are called business liaison. Okay. They are the business liaison, meaning they are the liaison for the business and they are representing the business. Now they need a designation. In some organizations, they call them project managers. In some organizations, they call them BAs. In some organizations, they'll call them system managers. I'm going into a banking organization next week by next month, actually, early next month. Now, the role given to me is product owner. So I'm going to be a product owner. Generally, I just don't know where I'm going to fit in. Will I be directly with the IT or will I be interacting more with the business to a point where I'm a part of the business? So I don't know where I stand. Okay. Likewise, so this one, the project manager, so the business liaisons can be called project managers or BAs or system analysts. They could be called anything, but then at the end of the day, they are the business liaison, right? So when someone is going to hire you as a project manager, you might be an actual traditional project manager, but then in the place where I work, even the business liaisons, they are called project managers. So the business liaison can be called project managers, they can be called system analysts, but at the end of the day, they are the business liaison. You could call them anything you want. So this is the IT team, this is the business liaison, and next comes the business itself. Okay. So these are all the end users, but then next comes the business itself. Meaning there will be around 4 to 5 staffs designated to give requirements. So they are generally high level staff. So they might be a director of policy or they might be a director of operation. It would be most definitely it's going to be executive level staff mostly or managerial level staff. So this is how the business is going to be. So the business will contain 4 to 5 staff who are designated to give requirements. That is their primary job. And they'll contain all these staffs, 4 or 5 staff. And the business liaison would be the liaison, right? So you could call them anything you want. At the end of, and then there's also going to be end users. They are part of the business, but then their primary responsibility is not to give requirements, but then just give suggestions. Just to expand that further, say for example, you are going to enhance a mortgage loan application, right? So you are going to enhance a mortgage loan application. Now, the end user for a mortgage loan application would be a loan officer, right? So the loan officer will be there. But then the loan officer will not be giving requirements, but then just answering questions or just giving suggestion based on the expertise that he or she has, right? So they'll not be giving requirements, but then they are there because they are enhancing a mortgage loan part of the application. So who's using this part of the application all the time? The loan officer. So that loan officer is going to be there. But then the requirements will be given by the 4 to 5 business staff who are high level staffs. But then the loan officer will be just giving suggestions. That's it. But then the requirements must come from the business. The high level staffs in the business are not from the end users. So So high level staff who are designated to give requirements are separate from the end users who are just there to assist. Okay. So this differentiation you should have in your mind. Business liaison is different from the end users and the high level staff who are there to give requirements. So these are three different types of business staffs: business liaison, end users, and business staff who are designated to give requirements, who are mostly high level staff. So all these folks will be stakeholders. Whoever is going to use the application, whoever is the sponsor. It's a very broad term to use, and all these uh, players will be stakeholders. Now, what is a project team? So, project team again, you can divide it into two teams. So, one is the ID team. So, there might be a project manager, two BAs, six developers, four testers. So, that might be a good ID team, right? Now, likewise, this is the business team. So the teams are divided into two parts. Project team is divided into two parts. One is the ID team and another one is the business team, right? So these two teams would interact with each other to build the product. Okay. So the very next thing that's going to be there in the project charter is budget. Now the budget depends on the number of staffs who are going to work in the ID. The budget would depend on the timeline. It could be, if it's a 12-month project, it's a different budget, right? But at least in US, uh, contractors charge anywhere between 200,000 to 220,000. But if it's going to be a mid-level of an experienced, a 10 to 12-year experienced contractor, they're going to charge anywhere between $200,000 minimum. If it's going to be a full-time employee per year, it's going to be at least 120 to $140,000. That's minimum, right? Somebody with 5 to 10 years of experience, 10 to 12 years of experience, something around that range. So everything would factor in when it comes to budget. So it could be around a 2 year project could be around 12 to $14 million. Then comes the technology. Are we using any new tools? So resources. So all these things would be involved when it comes to the budget. And next is the key milestone. So what will be the very first key milestone? The key milestone would be to finish the project on time. So that will be the very first key milestone. We have to somehow finish the project on time. That's number one, right? Number two, it should not go over the budget. So it should be under the budget. And then it should be a minimum viable product. It should be a product that the end users are going to like. The minimum requirements must be met. So all these factors would be key milestones. Okay. So what are risks and issues? Next is risks and issues. So when it comes to risks and issues, this is used interchangeably. But then anything and everything that's not in your control could be a risk. So say for example, if you are capturing gender demography related info on a regular basis, there is a chance for a regulation to get passed that you are not supposed to capture gender information. Nobody will pass such a regulation, but then in the case where it gets passed, a regulation like that gets passed, that's something that's not under our control. That would be a risk. So, say for example, there is a dependency with an external team. Say for example, we don't have any Informatica developers, there is migration work. So, we are actually depending on another team. And that external team has a history of not delivering the dependencies on time. That is most definitely a risk or an issue. So these are all risks. Anything and everything that's outside our control can be categorized as a risk or an issue. Okay, so now the project charter typically documents the reasons for the. Now let's just summarize it. The project charter would typically document the reason for the project, objectives and constraints of the project, the main stakeholders, risks, benefits of the project, general overview of budget. It would be a Excel document or a Word document. They just have it on file, you know. Uh, so we have it also stored in an Excel in my organization. And it's often displayed in PowerPoint presentations during our internal status meeting on a regular basis. So this is something that we do. So next is the communication plan. Okay. So communication plan is a policy driven approach to providing stakeholders with information. The plan formally defines who should be given specific information, then that information should be delivered, and what communication channels will be used to deliver the information. So a communication plan is a policy driven approach. So say for example, some of the team members are in US and some of the team members are offshore in another country. Say for example, the project manager, the BAs, the tech leads are there in US. All the developers and testers and DevOps team, all those staffs are in another country altogether. Let's just assume because that's quite common, right? So now in this case, if I have to get the status of the development, I could tell them to email it to me, or I could actually ask for the status in a status meeting that we have every day in the morning. That was called a communication plan, right? Now, if I tell them to email it to me, there's a very good chance that they could just email every week and then they could just say 60% of the work was done or 80% of the work is done. When in reality, even one, they haven't even started coding. That is a possibility, right? So instead of that, we could maybe plan it in such a way that we have a status meeting every day in the morning. So right now, so if there's going to be a status meeting every day in the morning and you have to switch on your camera, then you have to talk about it at least for a minute or two every day, right? So that way you'll be able to gather the status better, right? So that is a communication plan. So instead of just sending them emails, you have a face-to-face communication with them, a face-to-face interaction with them through Teams or Skype or whatever it is, and try to get their status. If they are struggling, you'll be able to better understand them and better serve their needs. Correct? If they are struggling, you'll be able to serve their needs. That is called communication plan. Now let's take another example, and this is even more important example. Say for example, you documented the business requirement document and you submitted it for approval, and then the stakeholder or the end client is going to give the approval in a IM message in Teams. It's just an instant message. The approval is coming in an instant message. So every 24 hours, the message will get deleted. You cannot retrieve that message, right? Every 24 hours, Teams will delete that message. If it's Teams. And I don't think even Skype is going to have it on store for a very long time, right? So now maybe after 6 months, after the code is in the UAT, they would come back and say, this is not what we asked for. Now you as a BA, you're going to say no, you gave approval. They'll say no, we did not. Now you don't have any evidence because all that evidence got erased in 2 or 3 days, right? A better way to get an approval would be an email, right? So now after 6 months, they come back and say, this is not what we want. They're emailing it to you. You could actually attach that email where they have mentioned, we are approving this BRD. You could just send it to them and you can say, this is what you approved. Now, why are you able to do it? Because you have the email on file that they sent. So a good communication plan would be to have that communication on file in an email format, as opposed to a phone call or a Teams call or a text or an instant message. That is another So this is called communication plan. So the keyword is communication channels. That's the keyword. So the keyword is communication channel, right? So what channel are we using to communicate? Now another way to communicate would be maybe if you want to send a weekly status to the higher management, you could send out a task report. You could send it out as a task report in an email. That would be a better form of communication. So it completely depends upon the team. The different teams have different needs and wants. But then there has to be a plan. So everything that you do, everything that you communicate must have a justification, must have a plan, right? Must have some sort of sense, uh, must have some sort of a plan behind. So that is communication plan. So today we started with a very brief overview of software development lifecycle. We covered what is waterfall, And we started with planning. Now we are deep diving. We completed project charter and we completed communication plan.